What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Black Man Unfiltered, where we have real conversations that challenge us to grow, not just as black men, but as people. Today, we're talking about one of the hottest topics on social media right now. Should black men go 50-50 in relationships? Because every time I open up my phone and get on social media, that's the argument. You hear one person says, a real man pays all the bills. Then you get someone else says things like, if we're building, we should both contribute. Then someone else might jump in and talk about the gender roles. Somebody else starts talking about modern dating. And then before you know it, everybody's yelling and nobody's listening. So today, I don't want to debate who's right. I want to have a conversation because I believe we become so focused on splitting bills that we've forgotten how to build relationships. So let's talk about it. So here's what I think. Right? The question isn't should a man go 50-50. The real question is what does partnership actually look like? Because if two people are only keeping score, like who paid for lunch or who paid for dinner, um, who paid the rent, who brought the groceries, who paid for vacations, then eventually somebody's going to feel like they're losing. And love shouldn't feel like an invoice. A healthy relationship isn't built on keeping receipts. It's built on trust. It's built on communication. And it's built on sacrifices. It's built on two people deciding that the relationship is bigger than their individual pride. But let's be honest, money does matter, because bills still have to be paid. Life is expensive. You know, there's nothing wrong with having conversations about finances, right? In fact, you should have those conversations before making lifelong commitments. But here's where I think we miss it. You know, when people say 50-50, they're usually only talking about money. But what about emotional support? What about encouraging each other? What about loyalty, respect? What about patience, forgiveness? What about that communication? What about being present when life gets hard? Because you can pay 100% of the bills and still be absent as a partner. You can split every expense down the middle and still have one of the healthiest relationships imaginable. Money is important, but money doesn't determine the quality of your love. Character does. One thing I've learned is every relationship, it goes through seasons. Um, there may be a season where one person earns more. There may be a season where someone loses a job, or even one person may want to go back to school. You know, maybe one stays home to raise the children. One may want to start a business. Life changes. Healthy couples don't panic every time life changes. They adapt because partnership isn't about everything being exactly equal every single day. Sometimes one person carries more, then later the other person carries more. That's what commitment actually looks like. Not keeping score, but carrying each other when it's necessary. Now, let me say something that might make everybody uncomfortable. Accountability doesn't belong just to one gender. Men, ask yourself, am I dependable? Am I emotional available? Do I keep my word? Do I lead with humility instead of ego? Am I creating an environment where my family feels secure? Women, ask yourself, am I supportive? Am I communicating with respect? Am I bringing peace instead of constant conflict? Am I investing in this relationship the same way I'm expecting someone else to invest in me? Because healthy relationships require two mature adults, not one person carrying all the responsibilities while the other simply critiques what they're doing. But let's keep it real. Social media, right? One thing that social media has done is it's convinced us that relationships are performances, you know, because everybody's posting highlight reels. They're posting the luxury vacations, the designer gifts, the expensive dinners. They're posting the perfect pictures. And people begin to measure their own relationships against strangers on the internet. But comparison is very dangerous because what works for one couple may not work for another. So stop trying to build your relationships according to the social media standards. Um, build it according to your shared values. If the two people in relationships agree, that's the only thing that matters, not the comment sections. So with that being said, I want to leave you with this. Maybe the goal isn't 50-50. Maybe the goal is 100-100. You know, two people fully committed, two people fully invested, two people willing to sacrifice, two people willing to communicate, and two people willing to grow. Because at the end of the day, love isn't about finding someone to carry the weight. It's about finding someone who's willing to help you build a life, and you're willing to do the same for them. The strongest relationships aren't built on percentages. They're built on trust. They're built on respect. They're built on grace. And they're built on partnership. You know. So if this conversation changed you, encouraged you, I gave you something to think about, I ask that you share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're new here, subscribe to Black Man Unfiltered because we're here to have an honest conversation that inspires growth, healing, accountability, and purpose. So until next time, stay authentic, stay grounded, and remember, real relationships aren't built by keeping score. They're built by building together. This is Black Man Unfiltered. Real voice, real truth, real growth.